What is something illegal you have done and got away without getting caught?
I stole my own car from the tow impound lot. Best part was getting the certified letter months later that they were going to auction it if I didn't come and pay for it.
You should have gone back with the letter and demanded to see the car.
When I went backpacking through Europe, I bought an airsoft pistol in Italy. A replica Beretta 92 FS. Nickel-plated. It looked real. It was heavy. I could have pointed it at you and you would think it was real. Because I'm a fucking idiot. I decided to bring it home to Canada with me. I packed it in my checked baggage, big backpack, and didn't think anything of it. Until I arrived back in Toronto. And was asked to put my bag in the X-ray machine at customs. At this point I realized. Holy fuck. I'm bringing a gun into the country. Replica handguns are completely illegal. I would have been in a shitload of trouble, and I started to panic. Lucky me. I remembered exactly how I had packed the pistol. So when I laid the bag on the conveyor belt, I laid it down so that the X-ray wouldn't see the profile of the pistol. When the bag went through the machine, you could clearly see the gun. But it was at an angle facing away. So rather than a pistol shape, it was just a metal rectangle. The inspection agent / guy / whatever stopped the belt, pointed directly at the chunk of metal and said, "What's that?" I looked him dead in the eye and said, "It's a toy." The next few seconds felt like an eternity. I could feel my pulse pounding in my neck. I was terrified. But then he just said, "Okay. Welcome home," and let me go. I retrieved my bag, walked into the main terminal, then went and threw up in the nearest garbage can. Yay. I was dumb. But I got away with it. Edit. I've been informed that these airsoft pistols are not, in fact, illegal. My entire life is a sham.
I looked him dead in the eye and said, "It's a toy." He thought it was a vibrator.
The summer after I graduated high school, my best friend and I bought season passes to Six Flags and decided to go every day because it was only an hour plus away. A week or two into our summer, Six Flags introduced their fast passes. We immediately bought them, jumped the line and were hooked. This was going to be the best summer of our lives. But the fast passes were like $20 each. Which adds up if you're going every day. Luckily for us, the stupid idiots printed them on business cards and punched out a hole when you rode. So we just printed our own at home on my friend's dad's super nice printer and rode the shit out of every ride we could. We started making friends with the ride operators. And they'd start telling us what color the ink would be the next week so we could stay ahead of the law, and the suckers in line. After 2 months or so, they started printing them on plastic. But I worked at a plastic factory that used plastic sheeting that was the same thickness. And we were still able to print them if I cut the sheets down to size. We got to ride the rest of the summer out in style. But the next year they introduced the Tamagotchi-looking fast passes. And I knew that I'd been beaten. It was the best summer of my life. And it was really thrilling to feel like I was getting away with something that was technically illegal, but also was a completely victimless crime.
It wasn't completely victimless. Every time you abused the fast pass system, someone had to wait an extra minute or so in line. That's got to be at least a few.
Stole some candy when I was 6 years old at the corner store in 1967. The summer of love for candy. I hid it behind a sock ball in my hand. I even showed the sock ball to the owner. And said, "You like my sock ball?" I still feel remorse. He was nice gentleman.
What is a sock ball? Just a balled up sock?
Stole a Blue Angels flag from the hangar they were parked in. When I was in the Navy, the Blue Angels visited the air base I was stationed at. They proceeded to kick all of our planes out of our hangar and I had to fix our birds out in the rain. In a fit of contempt. On the last day they were there, I went into the mess and stole the flag hanging from the overhead beams. I still have the flag and wear it like a cape from time to time.
Thievery of other units' shit is a tradition in the military. While it may have been illegal, it sure as shit isn't discouraged.
I once overslept for an oral English exam. So I forged the letter I received with the date. And moved it to following week. Showed it to my English teacher and she said it was probably a mistake. but I had to show it to the school dean as well to get approval for a reschedule. I showed the forged letter to him and he instantly found a mistake I made in the letter and just casually said that the letter looked typed over. I was sweating bullets at that point. Because forging a letter for an exam is a pretty harsh offense and could have gotten me suspended. But he just shrugged it off and gave me permission for a reschedule. I guess since I wasn't a troublemaker he just gave me a pass. The dean was one of the cooler teachers at school though. He loved SpongeBob and if he gave you detention work, you had to make a SpongeBob figure with a sponge and such.
I had a somewhat similar situation. I ordered a book for a course and discovered upon arrival that it was the instructor's edition with all the answers. So I just used that. Breezed through class. So just before the final the professor calls me out on it. Tells me it's considered plagiarism. Told me she was going to report me to the dean and get me expelled. I go to the dean myself that day and explain the situation. He sighs, closes his eyes, and starts rubbing his temples. Now I think I'm in for it. God! She is such a bitch! I wish they'd let me fire her. He says finally. He didn't care. He decided that since I was able to pass the midterms and if I could pass the final on my own without the book then who cares where I got the homework answers from. He also said there is not one time in your professional life that you won't have access to research materials. It's ludicrous to think otherwise. She was not happy and made sure to tell me, after I had aced my final, that if she ever saw my name on the roster for one of her classes that she'd personally see that I never got in. Told her that was up to the dean and she was 0 for 1 right now on that front.
I visited an abandoned building. Someone called the police and 30 minutes later we saw firefighters walking into the huge building just to search us. Luckily we saw it when we were already out.
Why would they send firefighters? Are you sure you didn't just accidentally trigger some kind of alarm?
I'm just here looking for the comment that says murder.
Murder.
I went into CVS for 3 things. Deodorant, the specific pencils I like to use, and a notebook. I grabbed the deodorant, perused the office supply aisle and saw they didn't have the pencils I wanted. So I decided it wasn't worth it to get the notebook either. Feeling like my trip was a failure, I left. Walked out of CVS with the deodorant in my hand. No alarm went off. No employee stopped me. About 3 steps outside of the door, I realized I just stole. However unintentionally. So I walked back in. Bought the deodorant and 3 other items out of guilt.
Grand theft deodorant.
Assisted in semi-stealing a car. Almost 2 decades ago my cousin calls my dad and says his car broke down. As my dad is friends with heavy equipment he figured my dad could get a trailer to tow it on. So my dad, my uncle and I go pick up a flatbed tow truck from a friend of his and drive 2 hours to pick up the car. We find it near where it should be on the side of the highway so we load it up and go to a rest stop to secure it on the truck better. As my dad and my uncle are attaching straps I'm looking at the car and notice something is odd. My cousin's car, late 80s Audi, had broken speakers for whatever reason they all stopped work so instead of replacing them with normal speakers he used house tower speakers, big ones at that back seat and passenger seat. I'm noticing there aren't any tower speakers in the car. I pointed this out and they stop and start looking at the car then check the plate number, they don't match. Cousin had a vanity plate. My dad immediately hooks the car, raises a bed and lets it roll off into a space at the rest area. We hop into the truck and drive off to find the car. We find it less than a mile away. Audi reliability jokes aside, what are the odds of 2 identical Audis, same year, color and even rims and tires being broken down that close to each other?
Not only that, the owner of that car must have been confused as f.
There's an annual competition held in Northern California known as the Kinetic Sculpture Race. Teams come from around the state, or even around the world, to compete in a days-long time trial in amphibious, man-powered vehicles that they've designed and built. During the year that I attended, there were quite a number of incredibly creative entrants, including a large yellow septic tank that had been outfitted with wheels and a propeller, and I was absolutely giddy at the prospect that my team might actually win. Unfortunately, A small obstacle stood between me and a chance at piloting the kinetic sculpture that I'd helped build. In order to compete, each entrant needed to be at least 18 years old. And I hadn't quite hit that mark yet. In fact, most of our team was underage. Given that the majority of us were members of the high school robotics team, we might have been more worried about the age-related mandate. Except for the fact that having the fastest vehicle was only one of the ways that someone could win. One of the other ways was to pursue the coveted Most Creative Cheaters award. See? The race in question was more of a light-hearted opportunity to show off the sculptures than it was an actual competition. Everyone still did their best to win. Of course. But playful shenanigans, like bribing a judge with stickers to overlook certain transgressions, were both expected and encouraged. Given that our team was lacking in legal adults, and yet still intent on attending and competing, one of my friends suggested that we all create our own fake identification. With the caveat being that they had to be very obviously counterfeit. To give you some idea of how the final results turned out. The young man who had originally suggested the tactic showed up with a card that looked like it was the illegitimate offspring of a tie-dyed shirt and a flamingo. His portrait featured him grinning from ear to ear, and the only visible text read, "I'm 18. Really? Trust me." That was the most believable of our fake identification. 2. Mine was actually just a scrap of paper on which I'd hastily scrawled "Max is totally an adult," because I'd forgotten to make one until after we'd already arrived at the competition. In the end, everyone on my team got to race. Hell, we even dressed alike, so that we could whenever we got tired. We did pretty well overall. And even though we didn't win any of the speed-centric events, we did get to go home with that Most Creative Cheaters trophy. The man who handed it off to us even took special care to list all of our various pranks, stunts, capers, and japes. Up to and including the fact that we weren't actually allowed to be there. TL, Doctor. I was a member of a counterfeiting ring that manufactured an unlicensed vehicle.
This is hilarious. Especially love your TL, Doctor version.